So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? Absolutely. Although historical fantasy isn't usually my favourite subgenre, I would recommend this to anyone who's looking for an easy fantasy to read. Hi everyone, my name is Terry Westwell and today is Tuesday, which means it's time to discuss our Panic at the Book Club book of the week, which is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. If you like romance, fantasy, or even thriller, basically anything fiction book related, then I suggest you head on over to the channel's intro video, where you can find out more information on how you can take part in this online book club. We announce books at least 4 weeks in advance, and we accept your bookish feedback in a wide manner of ways. Post your comment below a video, send in a voice note, or even send me a short video clip of you discussing the book. Alternatively, you can just send me a direct message. Elspeth needs a monster, and the monster might be her. An ancient spirit is trapped inside Elspeth Spindle's head, and she calls him the Nightmare. He protects her, keeps her secrets, but nothing comes for free, especially magic. When Elspeth meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest road, she's thrust into a world of shadow and deception. Together, they embark on a dangerous quest to cure the town of a dark magic infecting it. As the stakes are heightened and their undeniable attraction intensifies, Elspeth is forced to face her darkest secret yet. The Nightmare is slowly and darkly taking over her mind, and she might not be able to stop him. So this is a spoiler-free part of the video, where first we'll discuss any spoiler-free points before moving on to a clearly marked section of the video which will contain spoilers and more specifics about the book. As usual, let's start with those chapter lengths. They did vary quite a lot, anywhere between, say, 5 and 20 pages, so none of them were a completely unreasonable length. And due to the easy writing, the gripping narrative, and the single POV, I found myself flying through them with ease. Although it was a really easy to read fantasy, it wasn't too much, it wasn't overly complicated, it did still have a lot of world building, politics, and suspense. It could maybe have done with a little bit more character development and building, but that being said, there were some genuinely really likeable characters. I really enjoyed some of the more sassy and sarcastic interactions between some of the characters, especially the Nightmare and the main character, Elspeth. I think that they were written really well, and I think the author did a great job of showing the complexity of the relationship. I have no idea what I'm doing with my makeup. Now, it does read a little bit like a YA, and I think that might be because it's a historical fantasy and the main character is quite naive, even though she is in her early 20s. But there was a little bit of spice, like not tons, and it wasn't super explicit, but it wasn't really what I would think would be suitable for a young adult book. It does seem to be more marketed towards young adult, and I've definitely seen it in Waterstone's young adult section, but I would say that it's probably more suitable to new adult, so 18-year-olds rather than 13. Overall, I really liked the characters, the story, and it had an ending that made me want to immediately pick up the next one in the series. If I had to compare this to any other book, it would probably be something like The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, although I don't think the world's quite as complex, like there's not really any otherworldly creatures. I do think that the writing style is different, and it has a good balance between adventure and politics. It also kind of reminds me a little bit of Belladonna by Adeline Grace, or maybe even the Shatter Me series. Now we're moving on to that part of the video where I suggest if you haven't read this book yet, go do that first, because beyond this point there'll definitely be spoilers. What I will say about One Dark Window is that while I did really enjoy the ending and it was shocking and intense, it wasn't really that surprising. I mean, we already knew it was coming, we were already given that ticking clock that the nightmare was taking over, but that may have just, I don't know, played on the belief and hopes that in the end they would figure things out. I think it builds some really good suspense and makes me want to know whether or not they're going to get her back in the next one. At times I did find Elspeth a little annoying. I mean, I was sold fairly early on that she should have just told Raven what the hell was going on. He seemed really supportive and understanding, but at the same time, I can kind of see that if you've been holding on to a secret that could literally kill you since you're a child, you would be fairly reluctant to tell anyone. Still, I often found myself just shouting at the character to just tell them already. Not that I think that that really would have changed anything in the end. I do hope that the next book will take a little bit more time on some of the characters. I feel like we didn't actually get to know all that much about, for example, Raven and his sister. I think Elm was also quite an interesting character. I'd like to know more about him and what happened with his family and why is he so distrustful. I think next to the nightmare, his level of sass was probably my favourite. Not quite to the same degree as the nightmare, but still fairly similar. I mean, I don't think it's all that surprising after everything we've learned that the nightmare wants revenge on the Rowans. I mean, it's no secret that he wants to rid the world of them, and that's kind of fine with me because they're not really great guys. I mean, they unalived him, his wife, and all of his children. If he wants to come back from the grave and seek his vengeance, then who am I to judge? But honestly, I forgot that Elm was a Rowan. Like, they mention it a bunch of times and they call him Prince. It's not exactly a secret, it's very well known. But even though he's a pain sometimes, I just don't really associate him with being a Rowan. So that might end up being a problem in the next book if the nightmare does in fact want to unalive them all. I also think there's more going on with her cousin Ion. I think that perhaps she's being forced to use the maiden card for that long. Like, I think that maybe the old her is still in there somewhere, but I don't think that her full personality has done a 180 on us and she doesn't care. I think she knows that her husband-to-be is a horrible piece of work, and maybe him and maybe even her dad has locked away her card somewhere. I don't know, it's just a theory, but I'm hoping that she snaps out of it in the next one, or maybe even gets some redemption moment. I do suspect, though, that after everything, she'll no longer be getting married to the prince, even if he does survive. The uncle was a piece of work. Like, his betrayal wasn't even remotely a surprise. I knew right from the very beginning that he was a sleazy bastard. Her aunt Opal, though, now she wasn't in the book nearly enough. I hope that she survives book 2 because that woman was great. I couldn't really care about Elspeth's dad. I mean, his story just wasn't nearly that interesting. I get why he did everything he did. Like, I get he's sad and he misses his wife, but he still threw away his kids, so... Okay, so pet peeves, and this one's honestly not so bad. I mean, no one's got Sarah J. Maas beat on this, but repeat phrases, when I do spot them, they do drive me mad. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes it goes completely unnoticed and I couldn't care less, but in One Dark Window, Rachel Gillig was obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with Raven having calloused hands/fingers. And the thought of someone's calloused fingers on my face or running down my arm just isn't romantic. It's fine to mention once or twice, but it is not an adjective that is needed repeatedly. It also makes me think that maybe he has like a very serious problem or something. Like, maybe his hands are that bad and calloused that you can't help but just notice how bad it is. Or maybe that the main character has some sort of really weird and specific kink. So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? Absolutely. Although historical fantasy isn't usually my favourite subgenre, I would recommend this to anyone who's looking for an easy fantasy to read. It isn't super packed with detail and world building, and while yes, there is plenty of that stuff, at the end of the day, it's still just a 400-page brilliant start to a series, and not an 800-page setup for a series where nothing has quite happened yet. I think that the author may have found a really nice balance for fantasy readers who want a nice, quick, easy read, who might be a little bit more intimidated towards the larger books, and I mean that in the best way possible. So, will I be reading any more by Rachel Gillig? Absolutely. As I said, this book had an ending that had me immediately reaching for the next one in the series, so I'm actually already reading another book by Rachel Gillig. But let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy the book? Next week, we're discussing The Murder After the Night Before by Katy Brent, so don't forget to get your comments and thoughts in by Monday the 14th of October at the latest to be a part of the discussion. You can now do this on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram. The following week, we're going very autumn with the Pumpkin Spice Café, but don't forget if you do need a little bit longer to read a book, we do now list the next 4 books down below along with the discussion dates. That way you can choose a genre that best suits you and the best time frame to read it in. Thank you all for joining, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It is always appreciated, and I will see you next week. Bye.